Good afternoon. Thought it was about time I did a stream again. Still struggling to get back into the kind of routine of the thing. Stream doesn't seem to want to go live. Just figure out. Oh, no, it seems to be okay. Don't know why we had a sort of weird pause situation then. Hopefully it's all good now. Just checking the monitors. If anyone comes on, please let me know if you can't hear me or anything like that. So yeah, I wanted to again mostly do alts. Not receiving enough video. Let me just close a window. Oh, I've got something open I shouldn't have. Hold on one moment. Back again. Still not receiving enough video. Why do I always have so many problems streaming? Do I need like a manager or something? Anyway, let's see if somebody comes online and tells me that this is bad or good or whatever. Yeah, so I thought I'd mostly go over alts today because, again, Bitcoin's not really doing an awful lot. And again, if you've followed any of my previous streams, you will know exactly what I think anyway. And it's basically doing what we've discussed many times. So yeah, just as a quick update, so this is my high time frame chart. I didn't previously have these lower time frame entries on it because my higher time frame bias is down, but because obviously we're not, sorry, correct that. It's down based on, well, it's down and up, but it's indecisive at the moment. But anyway, they're lower time frame entries rather than higher time frame. So we had major longs off this 3-month demand, which if you want to hold, you can. Again, it can go a lot deeper in the zone if it wants. But we've also now made this 3-month supply, which is exactly where our recent top is. So we're in a bit of a quandary at the moment, which is a challenge. But yeah, I did put the lower time frame entries on here just because my other chart's so busy and it's a bit easier for me to talk about on the stream if I have them here. So obviously we're just hitting now. We had made this 2-week demand here. I've talked about this a lot on the majors because the majors are looking very similar to this, but a lot more bearish. Sorry, not more bearish. They've come much more deeply through this 2-week demand or are out the bottom of it now. So I've always had some reticence as to whether this zone would hold, which is why I haven't got it on the high time frame chart as a green cross and left long here. There certainly is a possibility of a low time frame long here, and then we just need to see what happens. When I did my last stream, we were, I think it was Friday 15th, and I was looking for the close below the weekly. At that point, we had a weekly demand here where we had closed green candle above this red candle. So we were looking for the possibility of a bounce there. However, we were conscious we'd come off 3 months supply at the high. So therefore that this could go back through. And I said, and what I want to see for confirmation is this weekly close to be below and to flip that to supply. So we did get that. Unfortunately, we didn't get the retest of it. So I haven't been looking at this overly closely for the last since then because I was in the UK here in this middle week. So I didn't really, I had some more conservative shorts a little bit higher inside this zone, but I hadn't put anything aggressive. And in fact, we didn't go back and test anything anyway. And I think I did comment on that in the previous stream as well. Like when Bitcoin is ready to fall, like quite often it won't come back and test for you. So in this case, we just hovered around. I think there's a 12-hour supply in here or something. We just hovered around on that, rejecting it before the bigger drop. Yeah, so now we're hitting 2-week demand. If this is still would be from a long perspective, even if this up move is to hold a retest and then look for another up move, this is still aggressive because it's not a very deep pullback. We've got all this chop through here. We had some stops under there and some stops under here, which were the purpose of these two entries, and then the possibility of a higher low just above these previous low wicks that we had at the start of the year. What else? I think there's not much else to say on that. So if you haven't followed my previous streams, like one of my concerns was that we're like, while a lot of people are thinking we're kind of down in these bottom areas, if we're mimicking the behavior from 2021, the 2021 bull run, 2022 correction. There's a lot of people, some people saying we're right in the bottom here and then we're just going up now. Other people saying, sort of making comparisons in here. There is a possibility, yes, that we're just doing something similar to this. And we haven't got much further to fall, but I also think there's a possibility that we're in this type of area based on the other structures that we've got in the comparison to the overall top. So that's my sort of fear on this. And I can't draw on this because all my drawings will come back, but to do with this, comparing this consolidation from January 2021 to this much longer consolidation, but from 2024, and then the pullback. So at this point, we're still holding demand on all those tests, similar to here. Whereas that was just a bounce that came off slightly higher than it should have done. This should have come back deeper inside it, would be mimicking that. And then potentially, so I do think there is a worrying risk that we've still got a significant distance to fall, based on the structure. However, based on supply and demand, obviously that's what I would do calls at this zone. Hi, Stealthy Sniper. Yeah, it depends on your time frame, and that's kind of what I'm trying to say. So this stream and what I tend to say on here, this chart, although it's a bit busy, is my time frame chart, and I've just got these are possibility of scalps. Whether you think you would do calls at this zone, you'll do calls for, a new all-time high, or do you mean you're doing calls for longs up until, 76 or 80K, or even the weekly supply there, and then looking for a bigger drop? So for me, obviously we've still got local demand to deal with, but, maybe we get a move up into there and then this happens. Are you meant for a day trade? Yeah, that's agreed. This is absolutely fine for looking for a long entry for a day trade. But from a high time frame perspective, it's much more difficult, and we still need a lot more time. Based on the 2 weekly, again, we've just hit a 2 weekly demand, so it is possible that we just bounce here and go up. This is a decent enough entry. There's just lots of factors, I guess, depending on what time frames you're looking at. So this is a possibility of an entry off the 2 week demand to go higher. Again, if I compare that back to this 2021-22 correction, it's not dissimilar in structure here, and as you can see, we just came right back through it. I would do the calls for retracement and get my money right out. Yes, sensible. Yeah, so for a scalp, absolutely fine. You can look for longs now. You can see even in here, this came down deeper in the zone, but certainly did give some sort of a retracement in there, and this is the 2 week chart, but it's definitely completely valid to be able to do scalps off the current zone. But I just have a reticence that this is still potentially could fall. On the bull side, that's obviously the very bearish scenario is that we're going to end up back down in the 25 grand. The more bullish scenarios, we're in 3 months demand here, could just bounce and go up. We've got an annual level starting at around 45K, I think. So again, that could get another bounce and go up. It doesn't have to retrace this whole thing. And I was also looking at the retests, I'm going to put my drawings back to be able to show, but so for example, here, we had the 2017 high and we came back in, we dipped slightly underneath that and then had the bull run. And I say, I'm thinking of here. Well, yeah, so actually only one data point for that. I thought I was thinking we had 2 data points there for a minute. But yeah, again, so we've got the 2021 high here, drawn very badly there, but on that red line, arguably we've had that little dip into it there, same as back here, and that this could just run from here. So from a breakout retest perspective, this again could be a zone that holds, but we're just looking for the lower time frame justifications for that. And so those are the kind of the bull scenarios. The bear scenarios are we've got this 3 month supply that we've just rejected off up here, and that's my biggest concern, is that we have 3 months particularly of ETF buying. We've just tapped into that level. And that could drive this price down very quickly if it wanted to. We've got like I say, the annual demand, 3 month demand, various demands down here that weren't tested. Let me see what Stealthy Sniper's saying. Long term, like I do think residential midterms are up. I do think we're going to see a pullback during these midterms. I haven't actually been following the midterms at all, or in fact, really much politics over the last few weeks. But when are the midterms? Is that now, or is that coming up, or when exactly? Yeah, and I saw Trump made comments yesterday about buying, but obviously that really didn't help at all. And yeah, he might have to use the stock market. So the stock market's another interesting thing. So yeah, let's just segue into that from what you've just said. So go to those charts quickly. There we go. So one of my other major concerns with Bitcoin has been, obviously we typically follow one of the indices. Like sometimes it can be more just the S&P and Nasdaq, and other times it errs more towards Russell. But obviously we've had these huge runs off these, not caring about supply at all, straight back through all-time high. Whereas, let me just go, maybe I can put Bitcoin on this. Whereas Bitcoin, like, so when these go up, Bitcoin tends to go up. When these go down, Bitcoin tends to go down. So it does tend to follow, and it's just the magnitude. So the problem is, what we've had is the magnitude of this has been massive to the upside, but Bitcoin, when it does the up parts, does minuscule amounts, and then when it does the down parts, does more. Whereas with this, when it does down, it doesn't really do much, and it's had very little pullback whatsoever. So I guess my real concern with Bitcoin is that if this does correct, then where's Bitcoin going to end up? You know, and S&P, and like I find these, like I always look back at the history on these, but they don't seem to follow history very well at all. But, you know, at some point they do tend to do corrections, but they've done one here. It wasn't a very big one, but fairly recently. So just at the start of this year. So, you know, how much is this going to go up, or could this go up more? You know, when it does these corrections, it has long periods of up afterwards, you know, and it's all fair and well to kind of say, oh, you know, we're going to get a pullback on the stock market like that, but certainly no sign of it as yet. And, you know, I think these did also create monthly supply, and then they just went straight through that as well. You notice charts repeat themselves. Yes. And they're more rhyme than repeat. Yes, they don't have to repeat exactly, but that's kind of what I'm saying, I guess, with the magnitude thing. That's what I was going to do, is put Bitcoin on here. So hide that and put log chart on Bitcoin. It was actually kind of different. So it was much more similar here, and then had the big move up, same as S&P. And then Bitcoin came down very hard here, and S&P doesn't really come down much. Then Bitcoin obviously came down very hard there, but it just hasn't been repeating the magnitude of up that S&P has. So midterms are coming up this week. No, Trump's comments very rarely help. But usually what you do is watch Trump. When he says buy, there's usually a pullback, then a crazy spike. You mean on the low time frame, I assume? Yes. Well, the thing with Trump was, I think when he made those real comments that were the top, I think it was that the actual all-time high top. Yes, I agree, but I think it's difficult because I tend to think these comments don't really matter so much, except if the price is at a place that you want it to be anyway. And yes, you might get a low time frame spike, sure, like an intraday kind of trade, if you want to trade that kind of volatility, you know, these types of things on the Bitcoin chart or even on S&P or whatever. But is it sustainable? You know, and in the case of 60,000, 60,000 is when Trump made a comment. The bottom? You mean the bottom from back before? I don't remember. I should map these on the chart so I remember really. But when Trump coin was released, and then Barron and Melania and all those things that have now pretty much gone to zero. I haven't looked at the Trump chart for ages, actually. Maybe I'll have a look at that. Melania was quite a good top signal. More recently as well, we were looking at that as a top signal. I haven't looked at those for a while, so I will actually have a look at those given the midterms are coming up in a few minutes. Anyway, just to say on this, so like my big concern with the S&P is that given Bitcoin does tend to follow it on the lower time frames, when this does drop, then Bitcoin tends to drop too. And this really has a long way to drop. So that makes me nervous for Bitcoin. In the case of the dollar, We've just really had a lot of sideways for the last, 2 weeks or so, or coming up to 2 weeks. It's now tapped into supply, so maybe we get a push back down into here. But again, the dollar isn't. The challenge that I've had even on the FX thing is that we hit this annual demand back last year, and it's just been going sideways since then. So I'm still long biased, but if this is ever going to go up. And then I was potentially wanting to see what would happen here on annual supply. So there really isn't much space, and we're bouncing between those two really. But the highs haven't quite hit the levels that I wanted, but then it just drops back down again. So now again, another weekly, possibly a 3-weekly demand, and I'm not sure if that's a 3-weekly demand or supply, but could get another move up from there. This cycle has floors. One was 20k, then 50k, then I believe soon in the next few years we'll get another bull cycle and the floor will be 100. Yes, you're probably right. Or, well, yes and no. I don't know. I always just end up on the fence with these things because you might be right. I'm not necessarily going to dispute that. But to me, it's not necessarily a tradable thought. So therefore, I try not to think like that until we see it after it happens. But if I go to my high time frame chart, really high time frame chart. So this is the one with all the timings, which I probably haven't shown for a while actually. But so if you measure out these red, blue, and yellow and the green from using the halving dates and the tops and bottoms, there's quite a lot of confluence of that. So if that holds, then we expect the next bottom to be in October. At the end of that red section, and then I think the next halving date then would be April 2028, and I think that is then the blue is the next top. I'm saying lol. I don't know why you're lolling. Anyway, the difficulty with this chart is that we've got this parabola, and the parabola is rolling over. So the pink parabola is the one that everybody was using back in 2018. We didn't quite tap that in the 2021 bull run. We're now significantly below it. So I've now drawn the new blue one in. Again, these parabolas are very open to interpretation and how you draw them. I tend to just use the bottom of the wicks, so I don't know how accurate they are. But again, you can see the diminishing returns there. And my concern is always when I look at this chart, and actually sort of BCH kind of reflects that, and I said this I think in the last video, that we had very strong run there, but slightly less strong, and then this is just not that strong. You could argue that at least this is stopping to consolidate and getting support, and we have had the ETFs involved here. Looks like consolidation made a higher low. Now, yes, very possibly. Can't see it right now easily. I can just see ether on my other screen. So again, my concern here is this distribution. And are we going to see now finally a correction of the whole move before then potentially we get a proper move? Those are obviously the very bearish scenarios. The bullish scenarios, we just need to see these demands hold. Are we going to get a higher low? We're still making higher highs, higher lows, so this can retrace down to around 15k and still make a higher low and still look for the next move up. What else? Going on Bitcoin, doesn't really want to talk too much about Bitcoin. See what we've got. Yeah, so we do have some confluence, at least with Korea having hit the 2-week demand. Korea was worth watching again a couple of days ago. It showed the bearishness, made that 2-day supply a lot more quickly than the US dollar pair did, which is interesting, which is right when the midterms are, I believe, around next fall. Yeah, fair enough. So if I thought you said the midterms were sooner than that, but yeah, if they're in October, then that's great timing for it. So yeah, from a confidence perspective, reasonable place here for a bounce. However, I don't love that CME is kind of floating in this green candle, and it has gaps below. So I would have preferred this to be on top. And if you can look at the data and confirm that, then maybe that's more viable for a bounce. We did also leave a gap overnight yesterday, And then we've got a gap from last weekend. So there are two local gaps above that could get filled. So that gives price incentive to go up from a CME perspective. Similarly, I would like this maybe a little bit higher on US dollar dominance, but I need to see if this breaks out. Let's go on the dominance chart quickly. I'm going to remove some of my drawings now. So similar to here, we're breaking up here, but we need to look and see, are we going to get some consolidation through here, or is this just going to reject and fall back down again? I will show you USDC was the one that I was more concerned about last time, and in fact it's kind of done exactly what we talked about in the last, that we had this range, and that I was looking for, if it goes below the range, if it comes up and either it's going to deviate, which is what it's done, it's come back below the range and then it's come back into the range and moved up, or it was going to reject off the bottom of the range and then take a deeper drop. So we managed to get back in the range and move up. And again, this has space to weekly supply. So the confluence is there for a bounce on Bitcoin. It's certainly a scalp, like I said, but it's not as ideal as I'd like, even on a mid time frame for like an intraday, sorry, an inter-day, even if not the high time frame, but like that mid time frame. I'm still slightly reticent on this as to whether it's going to be done here or whether it's got a bit more. Having said that, I also haven't looked at any of the data, so go and have a look at the liquidations data, any walls or anything like that, and see if there's other support for this here. And the last thing I want to say on Bitcoin is the ETFs. So this is probably the biggest problem. This is, Bitcoin ETF data. And normally we've got BlackRock, or we did have BlackRock starting to support some buying in April. That's this first column here. Excuse all these stupid adverts that keep coming up on my screen. But you can see from the 15th of May, barring one day, in fact, earlier from the 7th of May, except for one day, we've had constant selling for BlackRock. And then it's ramped up a bit with the other ETFs coming in with more selling, including, I think that's Grayscale at the end there. I won't scroll all the way up for some fairly heavy selling yesterday. And the ETFs do tend to be behind. I've looked at this before, and when the ETFs jump in, it tends to be at resistance. So that's one of our nice kickers that we can have, that when price goes up, if we then see ETFs, if we're at resistance and we're a bit like, are we going to short this or is it going to break out? If you see the ETFs jump in, then that's useful. However, I'd rather see them flat. I don't really want to see them selling to this extent. And then while I'm here, I'll just show the same on Ether. Smaller numbers, but again, BlackRock's still quite heavily selling the Ether ETF as well. Again, not ideal. So yeah, that's Bitcoin. And then just quickly on the low time frame chart, it's basically what I said previously. I had this entry here, 1 day demand, and then this 2 week zone. Don't love the big gap here. But we can see if we get a bounce, watch the low time frames now, then potentially taking out these lows, where's that, just 70,400, and then coming into daily zone down there as another possibility. And then final last hurrah, if it's going to hold, just down at the start of this most recent up move. And then, the short side, like I say, because I was away, I didn't get anything more aggressive, and it also probably wouldn't have tested where I wanted it to as well. I talked in the group about this making 2 day supply and 3 day supply. So there were, again, local entries that could have been taken short in here. I did have I brought this down a bit. I think I initially did just have this entry on daily supply up here, but then we've confirmed the weekly. There's a 2 day in there, and that CME gap also coming in at the moment around the 61 fib, depending on how much lower this goes. So I think, again, you can start looking for shorts, taking out these highs, left some almost equal highs here if we get a bounce soon. So yeah, that's Bitcoin. Ether and the majors just generally looking a lot more ropey. Ether BTC was something I talked about a lot in the last stream as well. I have drawn, so just be aware, I have drawn in a 2 month supply on this because it looks like it's going to make it, and we only have a few days left. Yeah, that's the other thing I haven't talked about as yet. Obviously, check all the charts for your monthly and 2 month supplies in the next 3 days. CME will close tomorrow and may create 2 month supplies. It's very close. So be conscious of that. So I've drawn this 2 month supply in here, not ideal on Ether BTC. But this still is, while it's grinding down really slowly through this candle again, it's not, I put the green line here for potential weekly support. For me, this is not a level I would trade, but it is a level that it could possibly bounce, and you can see it's kind of trying. But if you look at this on the lower time frame, it's just a slow grind down. So until we see more from this, we can't really think it's going to do anything other than that. Better candle today, I guess, but really I want to see this down in here before I have any confidence in Ether, certainly against BTC. Similar to BTC, I put in these lower time frame zones that I was looking at, just so we had something on the higher time frame chart that took this more easily viewable. So we had a 3-day demand here, and I think there might have been an 8 or 12 hour taking out some stops there that I was looking for a bounce on. We did get that decent kind of bounce, but only went up into, I think at that point it was daily supply. Now it's 3-day before dropping deeper in the zone. So it's still holding the zone, but Ether, yeah, just pretty nasty, dropped off the trend line. And then I think I've got, let's just check the low time frame chart as to what that actual lower one is. I think it's similar to Bitcoin, that if this is going to hold a higher low, so I think on both Bitcoin and Ether, they have an hourly or 30-minute zone right down the bottom here that wasn't tested. So it's worth watching in case you get the higher low. But again, they're not zones I'm particularly confident about, and they're not Ether particularly. I'm not confident saying long this. It's still not in a zone. Came down into 4-day demand here. Again, I had an entry, a possibility, and an alert possible entry down on the next 4-day demand as well. And yes, it might go up from here, but it's not a zone I'm particularly confident of. So I'm not likely, and particularly because it can't even get past 4 hours supply here. And Ether, I won't go into detail, but go back to my previous streams on this. I've been extremely bearish on this, really, from a higher time frame perspective. Like, I don't want to say it, and yes, it might rescue itself. So I did hide all those alert lines, but they appear to not wanting to hide on Ether. Yeah, the quick summary is that we came and we took out all-time high here, so therefore the most traditional TA, we expect to take out the low that created that high. What that's saying is that this demand isn't strong enough to break all-time high, and that these sellers are stronger, so therefore we probably expect to take out that low. And then again on Ether, we've got annual demand at $750, various things down there, but we'll take some time to potentially get down there, but that at the moment remains my bias on this until I see something otherwise. The macro on this I just don't like at all. But from a low time frame perspective, again, you can watch for reversal in here. We are obviously aligned, with Bitcoin coming into that relevant demand as well. So we could get a scalp entry off here, but my bias on this is still looking for probably significantly lower. Stealthy Sniper is saying, I'd like Ether to see 1500 to 1800. So yeah, 1500, that's down here. So we'd be back on that 2-month demand down the bottom here then. And that's I think the problem with this, that we had, I think that we had a 3-month demand on this as well. Yeah, so we did get a close above this 3 month, but it's just not caring. I think the 6-month closes are going to be quite critical. So as this stands, if we were a month ahead, this is going to create 6-month supply. If that happens, then this, I would say almost certainly is going to take out that low. The probability of that goes up significantly if this closes this is the 6-month candle as badly as it's looking at the moment. Yeah, Eric, was it Eric or Baron? I think it was Eric, wasn't it, who said buy Ether last year at 2000. Yeah. Oh, so I guess it's getting back down to his back down just below his entry now. Yeah, you never know. I don't know. I just don't like the look of this chart. And if you look at Ether BTC, for example, come on, see how similar that looks to how Ether's looking now. I mean, this admittedly didn't take out the high, but it's come right back down to the start of that last up move. So if we compare that to the Ether chart, again, we want to see that at least back down at the start of this up move. So that's, around 1,000. And then, this hasn't necessarily ended yet. And this also has a decent demand here, but didn't manage to break out. Just went up into the supply and came down. This could still make a triangle. So, Ether BTC might not be dead yet. Maybe we're going to see Ether BTC break out, but still Ether dump and BTC dump, just Ether dump less. But like I say, I just don't like those 6 month, that possibility of the 6 month. Let me just look at what the 3 month. 3 months just a bit messy. And then, like I said, the 2 month is going to be also critical. So we've got 3 days until the close on traditional exchanges. And this says, am I going crazy? Why is it saying? Oh, maybe we don't have a 2 month close. Have I gone crazy? We don't have a 2 month close. We've just got a 1 month close. Okay, we've got a 1 month close, and I've just lost my mind a little bit today. Either way, we don't want that monthly close to create monthly supply. It's going to be in 2 candles rather than 1, which would be a bit cleaner on the 2 month, but we just don't really want to see a monthly close below that level, or the same on the CME chart, which the close is going to be tomorrow. Let me just check I'm not crazy. Yeah, close of the monthly is 1 day, 6 hours. Okay, now I have to go back in and delete all the crazy 2 month levels I put in, because I really thought the 2 months were going to close this weekend. So that will have to disappear, but it's still, even if it's not a 2 month, it's still, so certainly on Ether BTC, that's going to create a monthly supply unless it really pumps in the next 3 days. But those 2 monthly levels I'll just leave them for the moment. Anyway, what else? The Ether Korea pair again, like Bitcoin Korea, it random line there. It showed the drop of the last few days a lot more quickly, so something also to keep an eye on if you don't already. Korea can show, and particularly if it's an Asia session, while the US dollar pair is messing around, the Korean pair can show a bit, things a bit better. Okay, I think that's it on Ether. Anything else you want to know, give me a shout. The low time frame chart, like I say, so in fact this one I've been a little bit more aggressive with setting my short alert, but even then it didn't get back up to there, so I was hoping, I think this bounced. So yeah, the lower time frame, I had the initial entry was on this CME because there was a CME gap here, and I think an untested 8 or 12 hour demand there, so I did have the possibility of a long there, which really just didn't get very far at all. A few days of sideways before this bigger drop. Like I said, we had that bounce off there, but again, haven't managed to get anywhere near these supplies. I haven't really looked at this, so I have an alert here for weekly supply up there, and then if just there was a more aggressive one here, if it came up into the 12 hour or 8 hour and closed the CME gap. It's now, I think, got a 5 day or a 4 day in there, as it's a 5 day, it's not when I'd really trade. And there's a 2 day with 61 fib there. No, dropped lower, so that's no longer the 61 fib. So the 61 fib now, so the Ether tends to like to follow the 61 fib, so always draw it on your chart. Like karma always dictates, as soon as I say that, it won't. But it does do it commonly, so always have the fibs on your chart with Ether. Like Bitcoin, I think, messes around and can go much more deep or much shallower and not really care about the fibs too much, but Bitcoin, Ether is much more reliable and low and high time frame. So the 61 fib of this whole drop, again, assuming that we're at the bottom already, is at that 5 day level, so that might be something that's worth considering. I need to think about this. I'll put an arrow there just so you know where I'm talking about right now. But just to get a bit more, like I always like to try and get a little bit more precision than that. This isn't really a level I'd love, but if it aligns with things on the CME chart and on Ether Korea, then I might be more inclined to put that one in, but I need to think about that. Then there's weekly supply up there, and then, if we get bigger moves, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But those are, again, the low time frame entries for Ether. So then moving on to alts, which is really what I wanted to talk about more on this stream, because we see some quite big drops, both but we're still, again, it's still just messing around with a lot of sideways. So we would see it reflected in the US dollar dominance chart as well. Like I said, this is still in the range. It hasn't broken out. It's broken up, sure, but it's still inside this larger range. So we just need a bit more time on that. But I was going through the total market cap charts and others. So normally others is the one I look at mostly. Last time I streamed, we had the rejection in there. I'd said that we were watching for what kind of a reaction we got in here. So we did get a reaction, but again, it's just made a reaction for a low high. It's now come back down. So still the possibility this is going to make a bull flag and do another up move. Unfortunately, it's not giving much that's very definitive. Because here we go up, we have a sideways, we go up, we have some sideways, we go up, we have some sideways, we go up, we have more sideways. So nothing definitive on this chart itself. Again, if you follow me, you'll know that my preference for this, as I just said, with Ether is at least there, if not here. Whether this is viable, I don't know. You know, this is the others market cap chart. So like, when you're looking at market caps, I'm always slightly more skeptical to make exactly the same judgments as I would on if I'm just looking at a normal price chart, because this is basically saying a huge amount of money is going to flow out of the market, which could happen and has happened. You know, we've had significant drops in the past. And, you know, back here, they probably people, or maybe I myself would have said we're never going to go from 500 billion market cap down to 69. You know, but again, just from a TA perspective, we've come up, we haven't made a higher high. We've seen what Ether BTC's done, which has come basically down, I think, and taken out this low. So there's no reason why this can't do exactly the same. And along that, we have an annual demand down there that hasn't been tested. But either way, I have said for a long time, this isn't an area I wanted to particularly long. Like, obviously, we've had some alts that have hit demands and we've had some bounces, and that's given us some alts going up. But since the February low, all we've seen is some alts pumping, then they dump a couple of days later, then other alts pump, and then they dump a couple of days later. And I think, you know, hype broke out. Those random EWJ and EWY ones are doing okay. We've had some random ones that keep going. We've had a few things that are running through supply. So when they've bounced, you know, a lot of things now have this 2 to 3 months, 2 month or 1 month supplies through here. So we've got a few alts that have run through or run higher inside, but not many. Like, most of what we're seeing is quite similar to this, where they've bounced, they've come up either to the weekly or maybe a little bit higher than this chart reflects, and then they're just coming straight back down again. That's a little dramatic, so quite a few of them are in this type of area now. So much the same as this, you know, we're looking for, are we going to hold here? And I'd really like something a little bit more definitive. I think I put a lot of 2 month demands on these charts as well. No, so we'll see. Again, with the alts, it's, are we going to make weekly supply here? But yeah, a very, very slow grind that for me is likely to resolve downwards. The risk is always how much it's going to, you know, it's correcting. We've got a down move, a retracement, a down move. You know, how much is this? This is a very, you know, to assume it's going to do the drop from here is an aggressive drop or aggressive a piece of analysis. So is it going to go up here or up here before we do that? Who knows? And that's what we're looking at. But at the moment, it's looking rather weak. You know, some people would call this accumulation and say that's okay. Like, I don't really know how to judge one way or the other. Like, I prefer to see strong moves up and then retracements, not weak chop like this. In contrast, you've got total DeFi. So compare that to the chart we just looked at. So it had that weekly demand, but it's just come straight back through it and is looking like it wants to take. It has taken out one of the lows, I think, there, or it is very close. But anyway, it's looking like it wants to drop down out of that mini channel, and similar to the others chart, space to demand here if we choose to trade that demand, which I don't particularly like, or all the way down here. Thank you, Stealthy Sniper. Good to have you here as well. It's nice to have somebody talking to me. But yeah, feel free to come back another time. Yeah, so this also made a 3 month, 3 month supply. So it's come up into 3 months supply and is now just dropping back through there. So yeah, total DeFi not looking great and weaker than the others chart. Total E100 was stronger than the others chart, but again is back. So it's exactly the same principle that we had. We were looking for that test on 3 week supply, and there we got that. We dropped back down. It did flip weekly a new weekly supply, and it's now dropped back into 2 weekly demand here. So again, just need to see if this is going to hold for another move or it's going to drop back through. Equal lows here. The only thing with totally 100 I liked is, despite the lack of history on this chart, so this chart, again, if you don't follow me, had history when it was first released by TradingView, and then for that, I think they decided it was inaccurate and deleted it. However, I already had all the drawings and I've left them there, and actually, like, I don't necessarily agree that it would be inaccurate because the levels are kind of working okay. And here I wanted to be conscious that we have hit the annual demand on this totally 100. So totally 100 is excluding the top 100 coins, so which is useful in itself because, like I say, what we see, we don't see, other than hype, but even hype is relatively new, we don't see the old coins pumping particularly. The old coins are the ones that are looking at, they're the ones with supply, they're the ones that have sellers. The new coins are the ones that want to go up, and this happened last season as well, that we saw the go back into this. So last alt season, here we saw, and maybe even here, we saw new coins being taken, pushing these runs as such, but the old coins don't look anything like this. The drop that they had here was quite often like that, and all they did was retrace. So when this looked strong and looked like we were having alt seasons, the older coins were just retesting monthly supplies and have now dropped lower. I think you'll see that in a minute when I look at the majors. But it's interesting to see totally 100 looking stronger because, again, it just highlights that we need to look at new coins. If you want to be a long bias, like I like shorting, so everyone knows I tend to be more biased short because I find it easier to see on the chart. So I tend to wait for things to pump, and then I look to short them back down again because that to me is the easiest trade. Most people in this space, however, like to long. But if you do like to long, the ones you should be looking at are the ones without supply. If you know things about fundamentals, by all means do that. I don't follow anything fundamental. But yeah, you want to be looking to short things back down, short anything with history back down, anything that's got supply, and long anything that doesn't have history and that has no supply, because those are the things that might run. We can look at a few of those in a minute. But yeah, from a are we going to have alt season? When are we going to have the next big decent run stage? Personally, I'm not looking for that until some of these charts come back down and hit these zones that I'm talking about here. Either the optimistic one or the pessimistic one, even lower on all of those charts, really. And let's just quickly look at total 3. Yeah, total 3 is slightly better than total DeFi, but again, just back in that weekly demand. So I haven't looked at the dominance charts recently or before this stream, so let me just quickly skim through these and see if there's anything of interest. BTC dominance obviously hit a high, and we were looking for the retest on the weekly demand, same as pretty much everything else. Ether dominance, as we expect, is dropping. Okay, so we've got a little 3-day demand on the Ether dominance chart. Again, my preference is for this on the monthly, as we've talked about before. Others dominance, I think these last 3, or others dominance and totally 100 dominance, obviously see a little bit more strength. But all that's telling us is that some alts are pumping, but not all. So again, just trading, like, they're quite easy to trade at the moment because I much prefer it when it's like this, when the price is ranging. Like, it gets to a point that's a bit too long, and we're kind of pushing that point on the majors at least anyway, which makes it harder. But initially, when we've just got small moves, you're not having to kind of prepare for breakouts. You're finding zones are reacting. So any scalp you take, whether you're long or short. So as I said, you would be trading this chart, but like back to the others chart, for example, you see it hit supply, you look for a scalp short, you see it hit demand, you look for a scalp long. And those things can be quite easy to trade. And I actually find it much harder when things are breaking out, because then they don't come back and test where I want them to. Which then for me makes it really hard because I wait for things to hit zones. So again, anyway, this others dominance has come down into that weekly or 3 weekly demand there, and it's got a monthly, 3-week and monthly demand, and now it's come up slightly below where I would have wanted it on the supply side, but it's a bit of chop through here. So as we'd expect. So interesting here, we are at the top of this like little down channel. So again, are we going to get another push on these alts? Possibly. There's nothing really definitive on these. Not surprisingly, total DeFi dominance is looking a bit more ropey. It's got a weekly supply in there. Again, expect this to drop down lower. So if you want to short anything, look for DeFi. If you want to, don't be longing anything on the DeFi side at the moment. And then finally, we've got totally 100 dominance. So you've seen that dominance die off, and that is indicative of the fact that the like the real shit coins, the really low market cap stuff can pump really hard, but then can absolutely fall off a cliff. And I think we saw that, if you've seen esports chart, that's another one that looks absolutely horrendous. I don't know where that ended up, actually. Again, I can have a look at that in a minute. But those charts that, grind up for a really long period of time and then just suddenly throw a giant red candle. And esports, I don't know. I didn't see anything about it being delisted or anything, and I'm not sure if that's what happened to it. But some of them, they become scary at that point, and that's another reason that I don't particularly like longing. Like I'll long, I mean, this is not a good example, but I'll long things that are coming down into demand or are showing low time frame demand, but like at the start of moves up. But once they've really gone, it then becomes really hard. And I think esports, again, I was looking at an aggressive long, but I think I put in the alert, just be very careful of it. And I think it got a bounce, but then didn't make a higher high from that point. Anyway, so not much new on the dominance stuff, but others just bouncing around. So maybe we're going to get another little bounce here. Maybe it'll hold this as support again. 5-day demand inside the weekly. The majors aren't really supporting that, so let's go on to the majors. So I did talk about the majors a lot in the last stream. So I won't talk about them too much now, but I really wanted to just talk about the zones that we had discussed previously. So TRX just has kept grinding. I was looking for either a rejection, just making a lower high off the top of here, or taking out that high, a significant high there, and obviously we kind of ground a little bit. Would have been a little bit hard to get into on a lower time frame, and has been thrown off a cliff today. Back down into 4-day demand here, so just need to see a little bit more. I might look at, sort of similar to this, when this did fall, retest and then a drop. So I might look at whatever supply is in here and look for the possibility of another short if there's some supply in there that's tradable. So you can have a look at that yourself. It's got a weekly demand here, but this is not, again, just to reiterate what I said in previous streams. TRX, obviously the structure's a little bit different. But similar to here, I was hoping, having had a decent up move here, we would hold support when it came back. And I think it had a weekly demand in here, but when it came back into that area, it just went straight through back to the lower low, and the risk we've got here. So it's worth the alert here, because even if I don't necessarily think we're going to make a new high, although there is an untested zone there, you might get a move down into here, a bounce there, and a tradable long there. But I would also say for these entries, be very careful, because we have a lot of trend line stops here. So it is possible that this just throws a giant red candle and takes out everything. Even though it has demand there. So just be careful on that, but that would be the next area to have an alert if you're not in my group and don't get mine. BCH has been thrown off a cliff. So BCH is a prime kind of example. Obviously the structure is very different to TRX on the macro, but this was exactly the same as comments I've made in the past, that these trendline stops here were making me really nervous. So while everybody was being very bullish through here, and it did grind for a really long time, similar to what I just said of Bitcoin earlier, that we had a very strong move there, we had quite a strong move there, and this was just a horrible mess. So I wanted to kind of be short biased, but then I was torn, and still am torn to some extent, with the fact that this big grey zone, we have an annual demand. And then I think we also had a 6-month or a 3-month. We got a 3-month demand in with this big brown area. But I said there was a risk that we were going to run through all these stops. However, and this is just for the context of TRX, like when we came down, we did get a very tradable, very strong bounce off the initial move there. So despite all the chop and the possibility of stop hunting, we did get a bounce that was tradable in between. Then we looked for the higher low, kind of got it, but only a tiny move. Then we made monthly supply, and then I looked for a short, and unfortunately, if anybody traded that monthly supply for a short, it did wick through it before that bigger drop. But yeah, so that's just what to be conscious of with TRX. That maybe we get the bounce for that, maybe we don't, but it could equally throw this giant red candles through the area. And that's kind of what happened. So finally, BCH came back down. There was 2 week, 3 week. And again, I've commented that there were so many areas here that it could bounce, so many levels. So we've got a bigger 3 week demand, then we've got a weekly level in there, a 2 weekly level, and then this 5 day and an old 6 month level here was my next alert. So we got small bounce off that level, but really not very much. Again, now just plowing down into here. And, you know, maybe it's time to play the bigger picture of this. With the challenge being, history-wise, we haven't got a great deal of history, but we've got an untested zone. So from a structural perspective, we've got a low, we made a low, and then we made a lower high, and then we made a higher low. But now again, we've come up against this supply. We've tried 3 times to get through. There's an annual supply zone here. We tried 3 times to push higher than that. You know, is it time to at least come down into here? Or alternatively to take out the low to find better demand than this has been unable to break the sellers up here. So is it time for it to come and take out the lows entirely? So these are the things you just need to be very careful of when you're looking at longs. And I've seen enough. So like, I think, you know, 2-3 years ago when I had less experience, I've been around since 2017 in this space. So I've had 9 years of experience and we're in year 9. But I think, you know, in the 2021 bull run, it was very hard to kind of like rail against people. Like 2025, or 24 was it, like when we consider the last bull run, that's when I've been a lot more capable or confident to say, no, I just don't think this is alt season. So when a lot of people have called for alt season, we saw that when I looked at the others chart a minute ago. I'm like, well, no, structurally, this doesn't look like alt season, and there's weakness. You see weakness in the candles, much like we see on BCH here. So, and, you know, you can compare this to the alt seasons that we've had that, you know, so everybody was calling for alt season when we had this run. They were calling for alt season again when we had this run. And they're good runs. Don't get me wrong. They're absolutely tradable longs. I'm not dissing the longs. But what I am dissing is the people who draw the charts. And I've seen it, like I say, since 2021, that people were putting their long tools. So down here or here, for example. God, I hate it when it does that when you just go off the log chart, because it does that when you're on the log chart. What we were seeing was people putting the long tool for a retest. Why is it doing that? Oh, it's just doing it 1-to-1. Back on the log chart now. Get there eventually. So yeah, I was seeing people put, so from this, for example, the long tool on the chart, and then, but the target is here. They're assuming this is going to be a new all-time high. They're not assuming that this supply is here. And then even, you know, when we'd done this and only made a high there, we then saw, again, you know, people calling longs in here, and again, their target's up here, but it's like, why? This is, you know, well, this, in this case, it's in a triangle, but in a lot of cases, these things were in downtrends. So, you know, that in a lot of cases, we were seeing that on some of the historicals, but yet people were still putting these crazy targets in. So like I say, I've got a lot more confident in the last, certainly since the 2024 bull run, and like coming out of this one, that I was basically right in my thoughts, but not voicing them enough because everybody else is being so bullish. You start to question yourself. You think, well, maybe I'm wrong. Everybody else is calling for new all-time highs, and I'd be like, but we've got resistance there in supply. Why are we assuming it's going to break, particularly when things are in downtrends? Obviously, it depends on what here is to the left of the chart. You know, we have some exceptions like Zcash. Anyway, I digress. So BCH hit a zone of interest, a large zone, hit another large zone of interest. It's up to you. I know this did also hit my my first alert. Not done very well. My first alert for possible. I'm just going to delete all this now because I guess I've gone through everything. For possible longs, because it had a monthly demand in here, and obviously it's just not cared, and it's just run straight through that. It's barely given any bounce at all, and it's now heading back down to the new one. And again, this gives me, you know, zoom out on some of these BTC pair charts, and you can see what we see reflected, not necessarily the same like for like, but what we see reflected on the US dollar charts. It's the, you know, the drops, the retest, the drop, the retest. So now in BCH, we had this annual demand, which was kind of giving me hope. It was a weak annual demand because it didn't make a new high. But there are sort of things of interest, which I think this might have had an annual demand. It was a kind of an annual demand flipped to supply. Yeah. So you can see on the annual chart, it's actually an annual supply, but it closed above to kind of make it annual demand, but it's really just a sort of sideways range. But while I've got the demand drawn in, equally it could have supply. So with that, you just need to see the annual close. But again, is this going to make a higher low? Possibly. Obviously, it's looking slightly more rangy and slightly less aggressively down than it was further to the left. So you could call this a range. But again, is this just a messy correction before the next drop? So just be careful. If you're trading any of these, just be very careful. Just go back to BCH. Okay, so what have we been going like? Oh, an hour already. Okay, so need to speed it up a bit. That's the problem with having the questions. Like, while it's great having questions, it is does tend to slow me down a little bit. Okay, so Ripple. So now majors, like most of these majors now start looking a little bit more similar to each other. They have varying, like a lot of them have this daily supply. They're coming off there. Some have weekly. Some have moved a little bit higher. But they're in this sort of very similar sideways range that we saw on the others chart. Some of them, like I said in the previous stream, had weekly and 2 weekly demand in here. So I did have long entries, and I said I was reticent because we still need to, not reticent, they still just need to be watched. They shouldn't be blindly longed because we are still in a downtrend and we're still hoping to see a higher low, but it's still hope until we actually see it happen because our bias is still down. So on Ripple, I very much had that continued down bias. Again, this last up move, I would have taken out any holding shorts unless the stop was trading off this weekly supply in here. Didn't come back up for retest, or 2-day supply retest alert in there. Made a new weekly. Don't know if it has actually tested that. So it hasn't tested this weekly supply, but so I threw in on some of the majors. I did throw in new short alerts, so like this, which I think was after I did the last stream. Maybe I could actually say, yeah. So the last stream would have been around here, just as we were starting to drop down, and we were about to cross that trend line. And I said, yeah, watch some of these long entries. But Ripple, I didn't have one. And again, at that point, once we did start breaking down, I started throwing in some short entries, and I think only maybe 1 or 2 have hit. So in this case of this, we've taken out stops. We might get a move on Ripple now, back at the bottom of the range. If you want to trade it long, up to you. My preference with this is still that we get a long entry down in annual demand down here, or 6 months inside the annual. We've got a whole long thing here to fill. I would consider a retest of here, taking out that low, if we get one. So again, I just need to see a little bit more of the structure on this. I didn't actually. I want to see a little bit more of the structure on this. I'm not something I want to long at this point. However, it is at the bottom of the range, so you can long that if you want. And got that short entry. Don't love that. Now we've hit down here already, but I'll leave that alert and we'll just see what happens. And then there's a lot of things. So all of the majors I've talked about previously have weekly, 3-weekly, monthly supply above. It's all very messy and choppy. I think NEAR is the only one that's gone that high to test now and has pushed up inside it. But I might play around with these alerts a little bit. So, obviously this is at a 4 or 5 day inside the 3-week, but it could reject off the bottom here. But we need to see. But I think that Ripple can tend to throw wicks, so I'm more inclined to go to the upside on that for short entries. Litecoin, as you can see, very similar to Ripple. This had the weekly demand, I think. So we looked to try and see if we're going to get a breakout. Had hit this daily supply multiple times, not dissimilar to Bitcoin, but just had a last push up, just back up into a 12-hour supply and then dropped again. Again, I had a short entry put in if we got a retest in here, which we didn't get. Nothing on the long side on Litecoin because, as I've said many times, I don't like where this is in the bigger picture. It is in a 2-month demand, but it's hit so many times in it that I want this now through and out the bottom of the 2-month demand. either onto this 3-day down here, or again, I can't be bullish when I look at this. Things can surprise you, but we have a lot of people were looking at this, calling this a bull flag, or they were drawing a triangle on it. I'd like to think that. I do think there is the possibility of that, but I also don't want to wait 3 decades for it to happen, because this has been in that sideways bull flag since July 2017, so 9 years. We have been in this same range, so it's up to you if you want to buy this and hold it forever in the hope that this giant bull flag will break out, because if it does, it probably will go to 7k. It's going to go significantly up. However, is it going to break out the bottom first? I don't know. Is it going to take a decade to do that? Yes, probably, even if it is going up. However, now down is the bias, and I want a new clean demand. The reason I'm saying most of these I don't want to look for longs immediately is because the demands aren't clean. My preference is always to kind of go, this is the first hit on that major zone, and trade that. Maybe I'll trade the second if there's something that the first has made that's a new demand that can be traded. But once it starts to go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, in the case of Litecoin anyway, there's many, I don't really want to be touching that. But again, small sideways range. Our bias on the local is down because we're coming from a downtrend, so we expect this to fall out the bottom. If it doesn't, if it goes back up and if it starts consolidating on here, then you can look for longs. But for now, the bias on this is down. And then onto the new majors. So start with BNB. So one of the things I also said last time is that, ironically, BNB and BCH, which were the only two that I was more confident about from a long perspective, just going to light a cigarette, because they'd hit. So BNB, these were my kind of let's watch entries on 6-month demand. It's still in the 6-month. I've just hidden the zone because it's too much brown. But BNB and BCH having hit major demand, so 6-month on this and then a 2-month, 3-month inside it. In the case of BCH, I think we had the annual and 3-month demand. However, these were the only two of all the majors that then subsequently made a monthly supply locally here, a weak one, which is why it's wick through. So one of the things I talked about last time is that I was looking for a lower high here. It gave it a little scalp, but I also wanted to look for the same move that BCH did, where it came up and it wicked, swing failed the high, and then potentially is going to reconfirm this monthly demand at the time of the monthly close. Now, BNB actually could still flip this monthly supply to the demand. Like I say, it wasn't a good supply, but it swing failed the top, so therefore we expect it to take out the low. If, however, it's got 3 days, it closes above 617, then maybe we can look for longs off the top of that. But for now, I just want to see what the monthly close does. So yeah, anyway, this was one of the 1 or 2 that I said. So we got the bounce on the weekly demand here. We got a bounce up into daily supply, so where I had a short entry, so that was the retest. And again, just need to see whether this is going to break that weekly demand and what it wants to do, because there's just a lot of chop and mess. But obviously this is stronger than a couple of the other charts that we've just looked at. If we do drop, we've got some equal lows around here and 1 year retest, not equal lows, or just kind of trend line lows, 3 of them here. And then I've alerted the annual zone for a possible retest if it comes around this kind of area. And then failing that, I haven't looked at the Bitcoin pair on this. We've got 3 monthly demand significantly lower. But we really want that to be holding where it is now. Could still get bullish on this. I just don't like that swing fail of the high there. ADA I was more bearish on. If you follow, you will remember. It made I think a weekly supply in there, so I was starting to look for, so we had a weekly supply, it rejected the weekly supply, made another weekly supply, rejected that, but then obviously wicked back up into the range from there before then dropping again. It did flip a weekly demand at the same time, so again, this is just the kind of the mess and the difficulty, but this probably reflects better on what I was just talking about last time, is that I was looking for, okay, we'd still rejecting this daily zone here. You can already wick through it, so we had a retest on that. We had a lovely short there. Then we had these new weekly demands, but I'd said I didn't like them because of the trend line stops, but I wanted to see if we'd get some sort of a bounce. So what I was really hoping for with these entries that I had in here is at least just a scalp up into there before that drop. And one or two of them gave it, like we saw on BNB, but ADA didn't. And I think Solana was my other one. I think Solana maybe did give the scalp up into the supply. Well, we'll get to that anyway. ADA I'm more bearish because, again, we've got this, we've got this support here where it's bounced previously, but that for me is not support like it shouldn't. I think that was a front run in the first place. Okay, significant front run. Again, this is a chart I've shown many times that I was expecting, you know, we had a corrective move here, we had a lower high, and then I expect, you know, either we're going to make a zigzag correction like that in the bigger picture, you know, which ultimately might be a giant bull flag, and then we're going to get some significant move up from there. Don't know what happened there, the mouse has been stuck. Or best case scenario, we get a triangle correction like this, and drawn that very badly. Oh no, and now dragged an alert around. This is not. And those alerts. Back in the day, you used to get a confirmation if you wanted to drag an alert. Yeah, so one of the other things, I'll show you what I had drawn from before. A bit easier. Not there. Okay, pictures. Yeah. So it was, are we going to get the zigzag correction? This line coming down into here, or are we going to get a triangle correction? So I was looking for the possibility we get longs there. We had the wick and then we had some retests, but it made a monthly supply and then it came straight off that. So we were looking for the shorts up here. So that was kind of when I went bear bias, when we flipped that 3 month or 6 month supply, in fact, I think there. So the aggressive short entries here for the bigger drop. And I remain pretty short biased on this, even though we're getting some long entries in as well. So the yeah, as I said before as well, the difficulty with some of these is just been the timing, because we've had so much chop in here. So while, for example, this entry, for example, is basically still in play. That was like an entry as a short off the weekly zone. So if you were trading that as a weekly, you know, it hit in the 9th of March. You'd be trading that as a weekly, you know, you trade the entry and then your stop loss is above there, and this is still potentially looking for the bigger move. But obviously most people aren't going to be holding this for 2-3 months until they actually play out. So that's ADA. Then Dogecoin. So I think like Doggy, for a long time, I was thinking, should I put a long entry on here? And then it did this wick and I was kind of annoyed I hadn't. But one of my concerns with this was, again, that it's got very, very clean trend line stops on this. And I also know Doggy is like much more liable to throw wicks. So I think this is one of the few that I just didn't want to alert in here. Like, you know, it's in a weekly demand, same as Bitcoin, might go up from here. I had an alert for 2-day, 4-day supply there, as well as all the ones above. You know, this is one of the medium strength ones, but similar to Litecoin and various others that I've said, we've had 1, 2, 3 hits on this zone, so it's not really a zone that I particularly want to look for longs on. Again, the bigger picture, my preference would be down here, but at least a little bit lower in this consolidation, given we've had the inability to make a higher high. You know, maybe we'll get a higher low and we'll get that big triangle, similar to what I had drawn on ADA a minute ago. Yeah, up to you if you want to look for longs on this weekly zone that we are now on a second test. I just didn't like the stops below here. Short possibly there or there if we go, we do get a move up. Long down here if we get a move down. And then finally on this layout, we've got Link, which I haven't looked at for a while actually. Similar here, we had a 2-week demand. So again, I had the aggressive alert for a bounce on the top of the 2-week demand. This, in fact, you know, has got a bit more of a clear uptrend than some of the other ones. It did break out here in inverted commas. That hasn't gone very far and only got to 12-hour supply. So the challenge here is that we're looking for, we are having this up, is this then going to give us a move up properly into supply? So where I'd really want to short this is up here, and it hasn't got there. So that's kind of what you're hoping when you get this bounce, and then possible short entry there. Again, if it's going to give that bounce, it either gives a bounce up into there for a bigger drop, or it gives a bounce up into here. But again, in this case, just didn't bounce very much at all. It wicked around for quite a while and has now fallen deeper. So again, trend line stops here make me reluctant to look for longs on this, but entirely up to you. It is in a 2-week demand. So again, my preference is looking for a little bit lower on this. This is in 3-month demand. So can you see, I hope you can see, like following all these charts, so, the similarities and differences within a lot of the charts, but also how we can compare them to one another in that, in this case, this did just about, I think it actually just missed my log entry in there, but did come just about into demand, but again, lower high, and now has a new demand there. So if we see link fail here and does drop lower and take out that low, then maybe we can follow the similar patterns with the other majors that are perhaps higher, that are maybe up here at the moment and they're kind of approaching there. So yeah, just food for thought anyway, and just it's looking at those similarities that the Stealthy Sniper said earlier, that the charts rhyme, even if they don't do the identical things, they do rhyme. So yeah, the same patterns repeat over and over and of different magnitudes, and that's all you're trying to do is predict the patterns, even if you can't predict the magnitude. So in my case, if you follow me, you know exactly how I trade, but I'm looking at zones where you might get a bounce. I'm then looking at the lower time frame reaction off that zone. And then, in this case, I'd be quite happy if I'd taken this trade just to close it up there. In this case, it didn't make it, but it doesn't, I don't have to hold it for this. I'm not trying to do those huge moves. I'm just trying to go, this is a decent area for a bounce. If the market's like really, really bullish, then sure, you can hold things for longer. If it's really, really bearish, then you can hold, if it tested up here, if it had tested up there, then, maybe you just hold back to there, or maybe you hold all the way down to here. You're obviously going to have a much lower win rate if you hold and expect the thing to go to 5 cents. But, your win rate should be balanced with your risk to reward. So, if it works for you, I know one person in my group is taking 2R trades the whole time, because that works better for him. And it works better for me as well, because I don't have the patience. If you've got the patience to hold things and to be stopped out on 80% of them, but have the 20% that win, make you a fortune, then great. And also if you have the capital for that. For me, I haven't got the patience, so I would just be bored of watching this after a while, and I just want to close it. So it's much better for me to take multiple small trades than try and hold them for indefinite periods of time, and then you have to worry about being pinged on funding and fees and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, so yeah, link, nothing much new on this, that I had that aggressive entry. We are now down in 5-day, 3-day demand inside this 2-week zone, so it could still move up, but I don't like it much. I want it down here to look for longs. So yeah, that's the first layout of new majors, and the second layout's slightly more interesting because we had a decent move on near. But let's do the boring ones first. So Solana, not dissimilar to Link. Again, I had the alert for weekly demand in here. Didn't get very far. I was toying with a short entry here, but I wanted to keep that one because in this case it hasn't even hit that high. Yeah, so it didn't really do much off this weekly demand, and I think it made a daily in there, but even didn't give much at all, and it's now potentially flipping a weekly supply. Again, stops below for it to take out. So again, in a situation where it could hold, but not very likely, or not very high probability. So I need to see a little bit more from that, but wanted to kind of come out of this range to really be happy with taking an entry in either direction. Dot, do that one because again, slightly different structure to the others because this had a bit more of a pump back in February. But since then, really just sideways and again been short buyers. So I think it also had a weekly demand here, 2 week. It might make a 2 week supply in this case. yeah, so it did have a weekly demand. I didn't have it alerted. Come off 3 week supply at the high. Really nice re-entry that I think I talked about in the last stream. Maybe I didn't. Yeah, I think it was one of the ones I'd said that I might look to short on that one if it created this daily supply, and then it did, came up into it very nicely. I've got an alert here for just if it takes out that low, but really this is an all-time low, so there is nothing stopping this just keeping going. So nothing on this telling me to long right now. If we do get an up move, monthly supply in here would be my first area I would look for short, but again, my bias on this is sideways to down until proven otherwise. Atom's been annoying yet again, and so many times I've threatened to take Atom off this layout, and I still haven't found anything I want to replace it with, so I haven't. Atom made a monthly supply in here, so I was very biased on shorts in this anyway because it was making weekly. When it broke this area, I was looking for longs here. It had a few bounces, but then when it broke down from there, I was like, right, the short bias, monthly supply, but it's just continued to push higher inside this monthly. Now again, we've got the monthly close. If it flips it, let's look where that monthly closes. Yeah, so if this closes above there, it's not a great monthly to trade, but if it closes above there, then we can reconsider being short biased. But for now, I remain short biased. And again, it was similar to one of the other ones, like if I see a retest in here, I might start being inclined to look for retest shorts if there is some sort of supply in there that we can get a bounce here. Because again, I think this is likely to take out the trendline stop, so I want to kind of look for short entries on this to at least come down to here and take out this low, or to come down and take out all-time low over here. Not that fair. So my bias on this is down. I need to clarify, I need to double check all the BTC pairs on these, like when, so I put the alerts in, but then I just need to check the BTC pairs are aligning if and when the alerts actually hit. So this does, I think this did have this made a weekly demand. So I was looking for a short entry on, this is one of the only ones that went up after that the short entries that we got just after I last posted. So daily supply in here, just got a little bit of a drop before pushing up to the next supply, and local supply inside the weekly and monthly. I think in the interim it had created that weekly demand. Yeah, so it did create the weekly demand on the close of that 11th of May candle. In fact, no, the week before, the 4th of May candle. Maybe I missed that. That might have been an error on my part to then look for a short when it had made a weekly demand. Has hit two times already on that zone. So again, it's not a zone I would trade right now. But yeah, I would now be more inclined to look for the possibility of a short re-entry if there's something on the 4 hour or 8 or 12 hour in here. Sometimes I look on the 2 hour or 1 hour, but it just depends on the coin, and Atom is just a bit messy to do that low time frame, I think. And then hope this is going to take out all the stops. And then finally NEAR. So NEAR, interestingly, was the one I said the other day. I was like, wasn't this the top signal when we did this? And everyone was like, oh, is this going to break out? And even I thought, oh, maybe it'll take out these stops before it drops, but no, it didn't. It just sort of stopped there and then had a significant drop, and then I think in this case ran through monthly demand. And so when this pumped the other day, I was like, oh, it wasn't near our top signal pack here. So it's kind of interesting it's back at the same point there. I'd have to look back to see whether that's valid. I think I'm talking about here. Unless I'm talking about, no, I don't think I'm talking about that big move, no. Must just be, I think it was just this little pump that was maybe counter. I think these few days was maybe counter to the rest of the market in November. Anyway, this is now up in, so this is more indicative of the other alts that I've talked about, that I've been concerned that we have, so we've got a 3-month supply here. There's probably also a 2-month. So a lot of alts have a 2-month supply in here, which is then converted to a 3-month, but they have already tested on the 2-month. They also have these stops above here. So again, like I've said many times, it's a challenge as to whether we're going to get rejections in this monthly, given A, it's already been tested as a 2-month, and B, we've got the stops above here, and C, we have an untested supply above. So there is still the possibility that this is going to push up, and take out these stops. But we are a monthly supply, so I just don't want to trade that. So again, if you got the longs down here, that's great. If you didn't, like me, then you leave it alone. I did talk about this in the stream as well, but I was looking for, I said this was maybe a bit conservative and that maybe you could look for longs on that weekly, but it didn't give a test. So unfortunately, we were looking at the shorts, in the last stream. I think it was just coming down here. And then the next day it just took off again. Not wanting to give the test that I wanted. But certainly now this is something I would start looking for short entries on if it gives a decent supply. Yeah, so it has an 8 hour there. So I will alert that for the possible. So it's difficult. So yeah, we're broken through daily, might make daily a supply, but not as yet. It's got a 12-hour demand a little bit below. And then has now made 8-hour supply in here. Has already tested the top 8-hour supply. So I would be reasonably comfortable with alerting here for the possibility of a short, based on the fact this is in the 3-month supply overall. So all it is just looking for what, looking for the pros and cons of every trade. So in this case, we've hit, so this original alert is hitting major zone. Then we're looking for what it does when it hits major zone. So, in this case, it continued to push a bit higher. It's a big zone. Had drop here, it's filled a gap up to there. So the risk from now looking for a short on the read, so it has a reaction. So now it's had a reaction and it's made a new supply. So therefore we can look for a short on the retest. It's broken demand, made a new supply. Look for what what supply could be retested for your entry. The risk is that we're still going to go for these stops up here. So again, you can take the short off here, keep your stop either above the 8-hour or above that high up there if you want to be more conservative. Then just see what the reaction is on this 12-hour, because it could still pick up this demand and then try another move. 10. It could still, even if we just get that and then try another move taking out those stops, that's your risk for the on the long side. If you want to long off here, also you can short here and you can long here if you want. I won't long here because it goes against my rules, because we're in this 3-month supply. That to me is just not a decent long. I might long if it comes back here, if it comes back here. But for now, but even those are not good longs given it's coming off 3-month supply. So so for me, the supply and demand always win. But if you see stops that could be hunted and things like that, then you're just conscious of those when you're taking your entries. You wait for better confirmation, you move your stops tighter, you take profits quicker, all those sorts of things. Yeah, so that's pretty much it on the majors. I hope that is useful. I was going to look more at alts, but now, again, it's, what's the time? 5:40, so we've gone 1 hour and 20 minutes. So I've had quite a lot of alerts hit, so something to be conscious of. I've had quite a lot of alerts hit to the long side today. We've had a couple, not many, like waves coming back into a major area here, so that's something of interest to watch. But then for the most part, I think there have been higher low retests. So let's look at Engu, for example. Not the best one, but again, hit weekly demand here. This is not horrendous. Came back and hit again, held, and now it has moved up, but again, it's still in a downtrend. So there's still... Why won't you select? Downtrend, retracement, downtrend, retracement, possible downtrend. Or possible uptrend being created that's going to break supply. So we're looking at those two conflicting pieces of information at the moment. So I've got quite a lot like this that are coming into those demands. As we saw, the majors, in most cases, the ones that have hit, no, not in most cases, in about 50% of cases, the ones that have hit this area have gone through it. So you have to be very careful. And yeah, so those are what you're looking at. Let's look at just some of these alerts that have come through. Zora is another one that's had a 3-month demand didn't get much of a bounce off the top, is now hit, sorry, monthly demand there, or 2 monthly demand, and has now hit the 3 month. Could go a bit lower inside, but again, something that's worth watching. Did have this massive move. I don't necessarily think that the difficulty with these is this just a one hit wonder? Is this going to do another second hit? I don't know. If you think Zora's got like backing or something, then maybe you can consider that this might do a second hit. But delete my old alert. But yeah, just you can watch that off the zone. Broccoli was another one, so this is I think more similar to Pengu, but has hit monthly supply, so has made a big monthly supply. It's pushed up inside it, weekly demand. So again, my bias is still down. So even these, which we did have big pumps or decent sized moves over the last few weeks. This is earlier in the year, but over the last few weeks, they're coming in hitting like this is the third hit on a zone that doesn't really exist because there's no history here. And it just had a wick, and for whatever reason, it found support around the 1100, 1200 mark, but is now coming off supply. So a lot of these, and we already are seeing a lot of these just down to zero. So need to be really careful. Sui is another one that I wanted. I was looking a little more aggressively because this did have annual demand here, but it failed me. So we had an initial bounce off the 2 week demand here. But then it made a daily, so I did put a more aggressive alert saying maybe we'll hold this daily. It didn't have supply, it was worth considering, and it hadn't even hit this alert, or I've reset this, I'm not sure, because it hasn't tapped that zone at the high. But however, it's just come back down deeper inside the zone, and again, might still hold a higher low, but still difficult one. It has new 3-day supply above now, so it's another one that's hit many times on this level. So yes, while we're having a nice little bounce there, equally, it could still just be doing this, messing around, attempted breakout, and then just tries to have a little bounce on there and ends up just falling back through and dying. So that's back on Broccoli, so I don't forget what's on my charts. Griffin, I think, is similar, takes the similar. Yeah, EWJ and EWY. So I talked about these in the last stream, but for some reason I just kind of liked them and I thought they could have hope and potential for breaking out. Like neither of them gone very far as yet. So when I say I like talking about the shit coins, and I assume these are low market cap ones. I don't really know what they are. But I want to get them at these points in time. Not after they've kind of ground up further and further and further. This is already, it hasn't really done a significant breakout. In fact, from a percentage perspective, it's gone very little. So even it's only done 20% total. So this certainly has scope to do a lot more. I don't know what this is. My only concern with these actually, and maybe you want to research this more than I have, is I don't know if they were stocks masquerading as crypto. So they did appear around the same time that all the stocks were starting to appear on the crypto exchanges or tokenized. So it made me, I was just wondering if they were actually stocks, which is why they're not moving very fast. However, I have been putting in alerts. So, this held 5-day demand did take a bit of a wick. This held weekly demand, but did take a bit of a wick as well. And then EWY, similar. This has moved a bit further, I think. So yeah, from 113 to 200, this is pushing 2 times. And yeah, so again, got the long entries early on this and it's pushed up. But once it gets up here, so we managed to get a short entry there, but it didn't come quite back down. Well, it came down a significant amount, but yeah, not into this demand down here. But I was looking at this daily here for possibility of looking for a long and also the 3-day, but I was starting to get a bit nervous once you've had some volatility near a high like this, that we're going to get that giant red candle. On that note, I will show you esports. Oh. Crypto. See, it has been delisted. Has it? It's not coming up. No, it hasn't, sorry. Correct that. No, it's still listed on all the futures exchanges. But yeah. So yeah, compare that to those charts that I've just shown you on EWJ and EWY. And this was a lot more wicky, and we did get a lot of longs on this back here, and then it just started being difficult. And then I did look at a breakout long up here. So again, you're buying at least at the right time, but thankfully, actually, in fact, this did make a new high, but just not very much higher, and then it's now collapsed off a cliff and is likely to make monthly supply in there, which I think I've also drawn as a 2-month because of my inability to determine when the 2-month ends. Yeah, so, and this did make monthly demand, but it's just crashed straight back down through it. So yeah, those are the things just to be slightly wary of. And somebody made a comment about trust earlier. Just have a look at that. I hadn't for a while. I think that was, I don't know, one of the ones that fell off a cliff. I need to see what the comment was. I'm not sure. I think they made, what the comment, was it trust? Maybe it was truth. Try truth because I do get things mixed up. No, trust doesn't look very interesting anyway. Yeah, I need to see what that was. A decent drop there. Unfortunately, hasn't come back up for my re-entries. Yeah, so in the last stream, I was very much talking a lot about how you get the entries, and I've touched on it a little bit this time. So it's looking for, when they hit the zones you're interested in. So in this, you don't have to blindly go into them. So the alert went off for 12-hour supply, and it did in fact wick, I think, and just took out that high. But once you see that happen and you see the decent reaction, then you look for your re-entry. So, here's just this is obviously I'm showing a nice cherry-picked, nice and clean one, but, made 8-hour supply, comes back up into it, tests, drops, make a lower low, made daily supply, tests very nicely into it, drops. In this case, actually it's just taken out 8-hour supply there. So that could have been another entry, but when they've got gaps like this, and they've dropped this much, it again becomes a bit harder because is this going to then do a significant retracement? So yeah, I had an alert here for retest of daily supply up there if it gets there, but it's just dropped further. I don't know what that comment I saw earlier was about then. Roll is up 30%. Yeah, so they're not always so nice and so clean. Can't remember what chart I had on here before now, which is kind of annoying because I always like to, it was the EWJ, EWY1, EWY, let's do T, because I like to track certain charts. Yeah, so keep an eye on those, and also trying to track them such that you can get the shorts if you want to. Like at times you can get the shorts, but then as we saw with esports, like sometimes they can just be thrown off a cliff, and then you won't get any retest at all, and then everybody just gets screwed. So you just have to be supremely careful in those situations. Okay, so yeah, like I say, for the moment, you can look at all these ones that have come down and hitting 2-week demands, like I said, being wary and conscious of the fact that the majors are going through those zones. All the structures are very different across the chart, so you have to take each chart in the bigger context. As we saw, I think, with Pengu, the bigger picture is it has hit a bigger demand at the lows, whereas some have and some haven't. So Ada is like floating in the middle of nowhere, so I'm like, no, I don't want that one from the long. So pick your longs if you are going to long off these 2-week demands. Then you've got things like waves, which have just been going down, have fallen out of that consolidation that everything else is in. So I haven't done lower time frames on this, but obviously, whereas some of these consolidations, that's the pen one. It's going to be the last one I look at. Whereas some of these consolidations, like what we saw on the majors, are sideways like this since February. In the case of waves, obviously this has been a more downward move. It's obviously made weekly supplies and things like that in there, which is bouncing up and testing and coming back. I'm not going to look at Zcash quickly. But, it's coming into a major area of interest now. So you can start watching this because maybe it will end up being one of the ones that's an outlier. So anything coming into major demand and where it hasn't tested before should be watched, but just be careful because they are large zones. Because that was the case with Zcash back in the day. So yeah, back here, you may or may not remember last year, we were starting to get bullish on this because it was one of the very few things at the time that had made a monthly demand. So I always think it's worth watching. They can be really painful, like this, this. I think the rogue wick generally means it's not a real wick. On most exchanges didn't have it, and it was just like Binance doing something strange in this case. Normally some other exchange, but sometimes Binance. But yeah, it can mess around for a really long time, and you have to have some severe patience to hold it. And we've said the same about CHZ. But then when it does run, like it really runs, and here you can see it's just blasted through every single supply. And also wouldn't have been condoning like looking for shorts on that. So now here we come back up into this supply. Had a long entry on weekly demand down there, which obviously it hasn't come back to test for me. So here, just interesting now, are we going to get a double top here? This does have history. Okay, I still have the chart. So it's not all-time high. I have seen people calling this all-time high, so just be conscious it's not. You can use the Zcash US dollar Bitfinex chart to see a little bit more history. You may not believe this initial drop because that's obviously when it was listed, but at least believe that, which I think is not shown on the chart I just did. So December 2017. Yeah, so people who use the Binance chart aren't seeing 3 years of actual history on this. So yeah, just be conscious it's not at all-time high and it's not even at the Binance high. For this, again, might be worth, actually might have already tested there, but might be worth a more aggressive short in here. So you can have a look at that if you want to. What was the other one I was thinking about? I'm just thinking about Zcash. We were going to look at, nothing to do, it was STO, STX. I think it was STX, so stacks. Something to keep an eye on just from the same perspective as Zcash, and I'll just see if it's still doing so. It was one thing I looked. So one thing with Zcash is the grayscale chart. So grayscale was very clean compared to what we just saw on the Zcash chart. Again, it has less history, but one of the things I was watching was that Zcash here showed strength before we really saw it as cleanly on the normal crypto charts. And so I was running through these charts the other day, and what I saw was this STCK, which I hadn't heard before. And again, similar to Zcash, it's one of the ones that are created. It's obviously, actually, I think it's one of the ones that's created monthly demand. So it hasn't tested it yet. Yeah, I do have the alert in there. Sorry, it's just hiding because I turned off the. But yeah, so I set an alert for this, and then I also set an alert on the normal chart, but I said I wanted this to hit first. But you can see from a monthly perspective, if this can hold, then this might be a nice kind of lead indicator for the crypto chart. And I had to look up what Stacks was, and yeah, apparently I'm pretty sure it doesn't align to STX. Maybe it's STO, but you could double check that. But I'm pretty sure it's STX. So hence I was looking at this chart and in the bigger picture. So this has hit this annual demand, but again, huge zone, similar to the other crypto charts, that preference would be for it to take out this low and to come back into there. If that aligns with the grayscale chart hitting the monthly demand, this could be a nice big picture trade. Just a hold trade, because I have no idea what STX is. Maybe somebody else knows better than I do, but if Grayscale are buying it, and if the Grayscale is doing the right thing, then or the chart is doing the right thing, then it's worth us watching it. However, from this perspective, it's still got monthly supply in there. It's got a monthly chart, so it's still got a monthly supply. It did wick up very high in it. I had a test and then wicked up much higher. So I wanted it to close above this line for the month, so it would be nice if it does. But something to keep an eye on. It did hit my weekly alert there a few days ago, but again, hasn't got very much higher and has now come back deeper. But that's something to keep an eye on, STX in the bigger picture, because of what the grayscale chart is doing. The grayscale chart still does have a bit of space to test that monthly. So STX, and then the other one in the bigger picture was CHZ, which last I looked wasn't doing as well. But yeah, so similar to Zcash, this was one of only a very small handful of charts that made a monthly demand after the move up in January. And it came back down deeper inside it, but as you can see, I've got lots of green crosses where I've tried to be where I've been going long bias. Um, unfortunately, it also is at the mercy of the market as well. So I just delete by mistake. I was becoming more wary of these because we have the lower high. But with the World Cup coming up, this was something I wanted to keep, and I've been wanting to keep an eye on anyway. Yeah, like I say, I'm just looking progressively less pretty at the moment, but then the whole market's correcting, so it's harder to judge. But something, yeah, keep on your radar. See if there's any clean zones for a higher low. Yeah, so that 5-day it's already tested inside. There's just nothing clean, unfortunately, now. So yeah, if we get a bigger market drop and we start to refill some of that wick, you can look at these, the 2-month zone there, which I've got alerted, and then the 3-month below. Other than that, just keep this on your radar. It's not looking pretty at the moment. But it is a triangle basically. But if it kind of takes a wick down into here, then maybe I'd start looking for longs again. I just don't want it to flip this monthly to supply. So let me just check where that's going to happen. Yeah, so again, like it's not clean, but I certainly don't want a significant close below 0.035 on this. But yeah, with the World Cup coming up, that should be on your radar. And I did have my football coin list, but as we said in the last stream, that I think Lazio was the other one that had monthly demand, but that then got delisted, so it just crashed through it. And then Bar, I think had a pump, but then died. Let me check what Bar's doing. So Bar being Barcelona. Yeah. So we had a pump here, came up into supply, looked for the possibility of a higher low, like if this had just taken stops off the bottom, but it's just died. So I was probably a little bit early on looking at the football coins. But yeah, just keep an eye on those as you start to see World Cup things coming out. And then I think the other two, I think it was City, but again, I think they've been delisted. These were never particularly nice in the first place. This one did actually have a pump up high into that monthly supply there. But it's now obviously new low on that. I need to rechart that. See what's happened on that. And then Porto. Yeah, Porto's gone now. I thought City. Let me just check City again. Yeah, so City went off the radar as well. That alert wouldn't have gone probably because it's now like it's only listed on futures on weeks. So yeah, I don't even know if that alert would have gone off at that point in time. Yeah, it's got no alerts on it, and it's no longer on my. It's still on my blue list, but shouldn't be on my blue list anymore because it's been delisted, or maybe that'll happen later. But yes, there aren't really many football coins anymore to be concerned with. Yeah, so then lastly, I think before I go, I will just quickly look at Trump because of what Stealthy Sniper was saying about the midterms. So I guess this is kind of interesting. So when we had the original listing of Trump, so the Trump coin, there was a Trump coin already on XC and maybe a couple of other exchanges. Then Trump listed his actual coin, and what they did was eventually got rid of the original Trump coin, which was nothing to do with it, and put the price history. Initially, they had the two charts with the price history onto the same chart with just a gap in it. So that's why you can see this. I think I did have other. Yeah, so I've got the Bitmart chart. Yeah, so similar here. I've got history that doesn't have sort of reality. But as I've said before, I also keep those zones because I think sometimes people can be watching zones from previous years as well. I don't know how that works, but anyway. So I don't think that history exists on any of the charts anymore. I think I just did deal with that at one point. Anyway, you can see this has basically died. It's annoying me now. So when I get to each of these charts, I had to pull my crosses that haven't been tested out to if they're tested in future positions. Sometimes you just can't select them over everything else. So anyway, I might just keep the line, but I might just delete that. So coming back into this, what was a 2 week zone and towards the bottom of that wick. So it could be of interest to watch this. I need to add in any zones because obviously I haven't charted this for a while. So while I was very good at keeping up to date with my charts at the start of the year and doing all my annual analysis in January, I then got, when I went away in February, I then got extremely far behind on everything else. And now I haven't even done all the 3-month updates and all that sort of stuff. So that's a bit of a problem. Okay, I've got like a floating 2-month line there, so I'm just going to take that off. Yeah, so this has just been dying, so it really hasn't made any supply. It's still got a 3-week up here, so should have moved these further before. Yeah. So in fact, that's probably won't be looking short on there now. It's made 3 weeks supply, but it's probably got something else lower as well. Yeah. So I don't know, this has really died for an extended period of time, so arguably it is about time it had a bounce. I think I will put that under that. So I'm just going to update these as I go. It's just a question of how aggressive you want to be. And when things have fallen, so this has been one of my big challenge across all the alts anyway, is that when things have fallen such a significant amount as this, it does become like, how high will this retest? I'll show you DEXY in a minute because that's one of the ones that really pumped. But these are things I've drawn before, but just from a weekly perspective, you know, maybe this just bounces there and dies. It's possible. Maybe this bounces up to a 2-week supply, or there's a weekly there. But there's some wicks in there, you know, to take out stops on those wicks, so it's hard to say, but, you know, maybe it just comes up to the 2 week and then dies. Maybe it goes up here and dies, you know, it can. Or it's going to turn, or it could turn bullish and just take out all these stops and just throw a giant red candle, giant green candle all the way up to the top there. And that this becomes the challenge when things have fallen so much as this without retesting. I'm just going to take that off. You know, what do we have up here? So we have 2 months supply there. So that's when I kind of start defaulting to the higher time frames. So that would be probably the more interesting one, being the monthly, somewhere in this area. But there are areas it could reject in advance of that. So in this case, I think I'll just stick with the 2 weeks. So from an alerts perspective, doesn't necessarily mean that, the other thing is people will say to me, so one other thing I should probably clarify towards the end of this stream, because people always say, oh, you're so bearish. When I start saying things like, you know, like I want the others chart really low, or let's say I wanted to buy on this somewhere down here, people go, oh, you're so bearish. And we say, well, it doesn't mean it's going to go down there. We don't necessarily, like, I'm not saying trade this down here from this point in time. What I am saying is there's nothing here, for example, this is a hypothetical example, not based on this chart, but there is nothing here that makes me want to buy until we get to here. So this for me is not a buy, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm bearish and that it has to get down there. All I'm saying is I don't want to buy unless, as and when and if it gets there. And similarly, you know, with these entries above for shorts, you know, I don't, just because I have a short entry there doesn't mean you should be longing it up there or up there or up there or any of these entries up here. You should only long if it hits a zone of interest here, and then it's up to you how long you hold it for, knowing that there are all these possibilities that it could reject from, or that it could just run through everything. You know, when you have many possibilities like this, it can just throw that giant green candle. So that's up to you how you trade it. But what I'm doing is saying, if it gets to there, I'll look for a short. Depending on what it's doing. If it gets to there, if it gets to there. So, you know, similarly, obviously I haven't looked at this since last year, but I was very much looking for shorts through here. And I think I was quite aggressively looking for shorts because we were using it as a top signal for Bitcoin. So I was wanting to really monitor it. So, yeah, back at this point in time, I think we'd hit the yearly level there, but also monthly supply or something in here. So I was like, okay, an alert had gone for a short. Then we were looking for those retest shorts, as I've talked about before. Still held demand here. I could then see we made trend line stops here. So I think I put an alert here for it might have been, actually, I don't know if that was a long or an aggressive short, but I do remember acknowledging that this possibility now that it had taken so long whilst holding demand that it could just run up higher and take out those stops, which it did, up into that monthly level. And then we had the bigger death. And again, at this point in time, we've had that pump and we're looking for weekly demand. Is it going to hold? And just got nothing. And this is very similar to a lot of the structures we see now. We're hitting these major zones and we've hit these major supplies. We're coming back down and we're now here. We're testing these lower zones, but historically, this is what's happened. So that's why I lack confidence until I actually see those zones holding. Anyway, so yeah, Trump's not looking overly promising at the moment, and it's difficult to judge because this wick has obviously gone right back down into where historically it was. So below on Polo, let me just see, Polo's MAGA rather than Trump. That's why it's like official Trump. It really threw everything off. Yeah, and I don't even know what this chart's doing. Maybe that actually was MAGA, yeah, because then we had we had Trump, we had official Trump, and then we had MAGA, and I think a lot of the MAGAs got delisted. But yeah, anyway, so there were lots of different levels, but yeah, there's not a level really on that other Trump chart that I want to look along. Without actually saying a change in structure is what I mean. So Melania, like similar here. So Melania pushed a bit higher than I wanted. Take some of this crap out now because it's new low. Do need to take that out. So similar scenario here. So this did push a bit higher. I remember this being slightly annoying at the time. And so it made a monthly supply there, and you can see obviously it had 6 months of kind of messing around, or 4 or 5 months of messing around before it actually dropped. So I don't know why I had that long in there. I have to put the lower time frame. But obviously now this is falling out of range. It's going to make probably another 3-week supply. So again, nothing here that I particularly want to long, except for the fact that it's just taken out those stops at the lows. We'll have a look at that in a moment. But obviously if we get a bad close on this 3-week candle, this is not really great. So if we do get a swing fail here, again, by all means you can trade that if that's your thing. But for me now, so it's coming off monthly supply. It did push higher, so that's what we were watching. It's a nasty coin. So we were watching back here, you know, would have gone back up into monthly supply. Could be gone. There were obviously some things on this wick. It did push higher. Let's look at a lower time frame. Kind of interesting when you look at the lower time frames, actually. Quick pop analysis. So very much just a question of if it can hold here or if it's going to just break down. So you can look for closes. I mean, I'd be looking more for shorting retests here, particularly if it makes a 4-day supply in there. I'd be looking for this obviously aggressive, but potential short of 93, 94, looking for that bigger breakdown. It's an easy invalidation when, you know, if it starts holding in here and hanging out for too long, then you can just leave it alone. If we wanted to be significantly less aggressive short, that would be up there. Not there, here. 0.155. There's a 3-day there that wasn't tested. Keep an eye on it. Like, I don't really like shorting lows like this. You know, I want to see because obviously Ripple is sort of similar to this. It's just taken out lows here. Litecoin's very close to taking out the lows, but hasn't quite yet. But anyway, very similar here to the Trump scenario that I think we were. I just need to cycle down the time frames a little bit. Yeah, so there was a daily supply in here that I was looking for shorts. I knew that would have known this was a monthly at the time, but a daily supply inside, then it's gone up into the higher in the daily, maybe there was a 12-hour and 8-hour at the top here, and then it's pushed, right up to the top, not taken out the wick before that bigger drop. So again, it's completed what it should do. So when it goes up and tests monthly supply, even though in this case it's pushed really high inside it, all it needs to do is take out that low to complete the lower low from monthly supply. So arguably this is done. But does that mean you want to long it? No, not necessarily. So you could long based on swing fail of the low here. My preference again would be to see that happen in something over to the left. And obviously there is nothing, because this really just went to zero. It was released. I think it went up for a little bit on some of the other. I don't know if it reflects on this or not. No, I think on Solana network it went up a little bit before, and then trapped a load of people, and then literally just died for a year after. So anyway, yeah, if you want to trade this, you can look for aggressive shorts on this, I think. Retest of around here, and then if it starts holding or pushing, then just leave it alone. I love drawing charts like this. This is what excites me about charting and about crypto, I guess. Like when you really are charting from top down, and I've done this pretty quickly, and I haven't done it fully from top down because I already had I had one of the monthlies and I added the others. But the wick up here, okay, it hasn't quite hit the 5-day, but it's a 5-day supply. And as you draw each of the levels, you see why the price is rejected in each area. So now here, it's come back up. It had a 3-week supply. It's got 2 dailies inside it. Hasn't quite made the top one. If it swing fails here, then yes, maybe it could go and take out all these stops and run up to that upper section there. Not something I particularly count on with this. I'd be more inclined to look for if it rejects here and get a short to zero. Anyway, I just want to look for this for interest's sake. I don't think this really helps with the Trump situation. And I don't think Sniper really told me when the midterms actually were. I think initially he said in a few weeks' time, but then he said October. So I don't know if it would align with when the potential bottom is based on history. Are there any other alts I can look at while I'm here just before I end? I would say Hype is probably the one I should end on because people will find that interesting. So Hype is finally made its all-time high. So again, this is a better example of something bullish. So it did give some shorts through here, but just continued to push. But when it came down into here, it hit 3 months demand. So it hit 3 months on the wick, then it retested here. Then it was slightly awkward and annoying because I was looking for retest for the higher low and just a little bit too aggressive here. Came down deeper before the pump, so kind of missed that initial pump. Got some shorts off it, and then got a nice long here on the retest. So once it made a 2-week demand, then you're looking for the retest. Another short, another long re-entry. Too aggressive on the short here. Then it's just a question of, is it going to make a lower high at this point? So it's certainly worth looking for shorts here. And in some cases they're going to work, and in other cases they're going to fail. Again, long entry, short entry, another not good short entry there, not good short entry there before it's like pumped and broken out. Now is the real sort of the nerve-wracking point. But Hype's a bit different because, again, it's an exchange. We know people are using it. But a lot of things at this point in time are when they become difficult because is it going to break out or is it just going to die from here? I'm trying to think. There's been a few examples recently. Unfortunately, I can't quite remember which ones. But yeah, I mean, if you want to trade long, it's just come off daily demand here. If you want to trade long here with your stop onto the daily demand, there's no reason you can't do that and see if this just keeps going from here. So no supply. But yeah, this is one of the nicer ones that at least, while so much of what we've looked at this afternoon has been in downtrends, at least this, however, again, it's pretty ugly through here, but it's a bigger uptrend. It's retested a major zone here, and then it's gone up and it's broken the new high. Sorry, not broken. I wouldn't say it hasn't significantly broken out yet, but it's broken the high. So again, it's completed its objective of this 3-month demand. And rather annoying fashion, you can see all the crosses I've had. Isn't the annoying fashion being is when it just decided to retest any of the levels that I wanted to retest. So yeah, I did have a more aggressive one here, but obviously it messed around for a while and didn't come back down for that final one before And bear in mind, I'm not following these like intricately. Then I just set the alert and I go and look at something else unless I'm actually trading it actively myself. Aria, since we're here, so yeah, this is another one that had a lovely road to hell. And why, just to be conscious of what these coins can do, I guess. You know, it had this grind up, got a couple of longs in, did manage to get a couple of shorts in, although it then wicked first before this drop, went through a demand, then back into a demand, pumped again, straight back through supply again, straight back through demand, and then is now going to zero. Appears to be. It hasn't been delisted either. So I think I did put alert here for a short on that 3-day supply in there, but it hasn't given me a retest. But yeah, just another great example of how alts can be super nasty when they want to be. And what's the other? I'm trying to remember. I can't remember the name of it now. Traddle, that's it. I feel like Traddle did something similar. Yeah. So another prime example. So yeah, when you're looking at hype, for example, hype has more reason probably to break out than Traddle, or whatever the hell Traddle is. But you know, don't be thinking that your coin is necessarily an exception unless you've really got solid fundamentals, which hype may have. But you know that these things can look like they're really nice, breaking out, and then just collapse. So be very, very careful, and particularly when they're around the all-time high retests. You know, like you can see, the black crosses on my charts are generally where it's not necessarily a short or a long, but they're basically when something's hit all-time high or all-time low. It's just to watch it, because those are when you can get the big moves. Either it reverses back inside, and so you could be looking either direction. So it doesn't necessarily signify short here; it just signifies watch at this point in time. And similarly, when it hits down here, we could also say watch at this point in time. And in this case, I mean, so the all-time lows tend to mean it's more than likely just going to zero. All-time highs, 50-50. You know, you just need to pick your moment and pick your coin. But you know, once you've got that momentum down, there is no reason you can't look for aggressive entries like this. You know, made a 12-hour supply in there, and it's just, you know, run off that, because quite often once the momentum's gone, they're just not going to come back. Right, I'm trying to think if there's anything else to say before I sign off for the evening. 6:20, so we've been going 2 hours. It's probably about time I signed off. If there's anybody here and you have anything you want to ask, feel free. H is another one that's a little bit strong, stronger than expected, but hard to know if it was going to run all the stops again, having missed the test of this zone down here. So many alts so little time, and I really need to go through my list again and add the new stuff and get rid of the old stuff. Okay, I might look at UV just as my final, because it keeps popping out at me at minus 15%. Again, some annoying volatility there with how 3-day demand has run through it, but then has picked up the previous high as support rather than coming back down into where my next alert was. Monthly demand down here, come up into 12-hour supply there. Yeah, I think I'm going to sign off now anyway. So, quick summary on the market in general. I'm still bias bound because nothing has made me think otherwise from the bigger picture. However, some alts are pumping, obviously. I think I haven't really covered today, but I still think it's very hard to find which alts are pumping, other than the old thing like hype, which is maybe more obvious and people are talking about. But other than that, you know, quite often you're just getting random pumps or some random alts going. For me, those are the ones you short. You look at the heading in supply, except if they don't have supply. So if they don't have supply, then you can look for long re-entries. If they have supply, then look to short them back down again, because so many things are just going up. I think bar was the best example I showed earlier, of the extreme version, you know, where you get the pump for a few days into supply and then drops back down, breaks demand. And there's quite a lot of stuff, I think, that just looks like that. Yeah, same here, you know, beamed pumped, didn't get very high on this, didn't get to my only long entry, but obviously hit weekly demand there, hasn't held, retested again, supply is dropping. And I think so many, wet, another nice example. Monthly supply there, perfect short all the way down, coming to weekly demand, isn't holding. So it's a sad state of affairs, this market. So yeah, choose your poison. If you like to long, then I would say pick the ones that have started to move but haven't got supply. If you like to short, which I prefer, then wait until things hit major supply like this, and then short them back down again, because that, to me, as always, is the easiest trade. Again, I haven't got all of these in here, but you can see as I sort of scroll through some of these, you're just tapping into weekly supply, dying, demand not holding. Same here, just took out. That's actually just Maurus has just taken out that zone. It's not quite got up to take up that, but it's had monthly demand here, but again, it's just dropped deep inside it. It's something, that might pick up at a later date. Just got to come deep inside it, but essentially it's still holding that 2-month zone there. UAI is nice, actually. I do like this chart. Keep an eye on that, because I think that's kind of a nice consolidation. I still would really like the market to just kind of dump out these stops and then go, but I like how this is kind of accumulating through here and is holding. It's quite a nice chart to trade, so you can keep an eye on that. Truth we looked at before, just really, really nice clean dumping on that once it had hit the supply at the high. All again, hasn't come back to test zones that I wanted from the 12-hour daily, etc. perspective. Taking out some support now, didn't get much of a bounce off demand. So yeah, anyway, I'm digressing again a little bit, but yeah, I hope that gives you some idea of how to trade alts, or how I think is best to trade them at the moment. Feel free to come and say hi to me on Telegram. Come join my group if you want to get access to my alerts. And any analysis. I don't get asked these days. Most people who follow me know how I trade, so they don't necessarily ask me specifically to chart these things, because they know what that means if something hits a weekly supply or whatever, and they know what to do. But if you want to learn more about that, please feel free to come and join Telegram and say hi to me. And yeah, have a great week. I hope that the market is not wrecking you, and if it is, then you should follow me, because while I may be somewhat indecisive at times, I think generally I'm quite a lot more objective than a lot of other analysts out there. So at least, I'll give you both sides of the story and both sides of what you think is going to, what I think could happen and what's tradable. So for example, today, back to what Bitcoin is doing, we've had this alert in here for a while, and it's starting to give a bit of a bounce off that 2-day and 2-week level. So the alert goes and you're just watching to see the reaction, to see if something low time frame tradable off it. This is starting to look like it might have some hope, but we need to give it a little bit more time. So have a great week, and please come and say hi on Telegram sometime. Bye for now.